Ocean Springs Planning Commission. All commissioners present except for Mike Davis should be here a little bit late. We'll go ahead and get started. If I can get everybody that can rise, please rise. I'll say a quick prayer for us, and Joey's going to start us off in the Pledge of Allegiance after. God, we thank you so much for this day. We thank you so much for this city, and we thank you so much for the opportunity we have to serve it. Please help us to make informed decisions, good decisions for the city and not for the individual. Help us to continue to look for you for the right answers. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank y'all. A couple of quick items on the agenda. Number one, I do believe application number 4C, Nicole Wall, that is the DeSoto Street rezoning, is being tabled, and if I understand indefinitely, correct?
Correct. It'll be re-advertised.
All right, so tabled, not to come back next week, or next month rather, so we'll be re-advertised at a later date. Barring any objection from the city attorney for getting out of order, I would actually suggest we consider hearing discussion item 7A in between items 4A and 4B, as I think there could be some merit to that discussion that we need to consider in item 4B. No problem with that? All right, do I have a motion to so do? So moved. I got a motion with Kevin. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Matthew. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So we're going to hear 7A discussion after the item 4A. All right, back on to our regularly scheduled programming. Call the meeting to order. Check.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Did you do, you said you did public, B, A what?
Item C is off the agenda.
Would that be B?
No, ma'am. Item C, DeSoto Street.
Okay.
We're still going to hear item B, the Pershing, later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it is?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay,
Right.
that's,
So first first motion, I assume everybody has a copy of the minutes. Everybody's reviewed them. Did anybody have any comments or questions on this? I got a motion by Matthew to accept the minutes for the February 14th meeting. Second. Second by Kevin. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. So those minutes will be forever in the annals of history. Item 3, old business. There is none. Move right down to item 4A. This is going to be 408 Russell Avenue, parcel ID at 614304500. Eric Creel is requesting approval to construct a single-family lot on a historically platted legal non-conforming lot. I assume Wade is going to tell us a little history on it.
I'll give you the history of this, and thank you. I'll point out this is on the east side of Russell Avenue, between Calhoun Avenue and Porter. And this is a very small piece of property. It's only a little over 7,000 square feet, just under 7,200 square feet, 68 and some change feet in width, and 99 feet in depth. It is zone R2, which single family, which normally requires 80 feet of width and 11,250 feet of area. So this property is both undersized in width and total area, which is why it's coming to you. But the plans are for about a 40 by 45 foot building pad. There is sufficient room on the property. There are utilities available in the street for the building. So the plan indicates that it complies with the minimum building setback requirements. So from that standpoint, it has sufficient area, and we're recommending approval of it. This motion is on page 2 of the report, if you'd like to look at that, or if you have any questions, I'm glad to answer them. And that's
I
it.
think you kind of said it already, but just to confirm, a lot of these have variances associated, but this is variance-free, correct?
This one is variance-free. Right, there are other properties on this same side of the street that have come to you, come to the zoning board for variances to that's used property with be able to put a house on it.
This is probably one of the bigger properties on Russell. Okay, anybody else got any questions for Wade before we see if there's anybody want to speak? Questions, comments, concerns? All right, is the applicant here and did he want to speak? You don't have to if you don't want to. Does anybody else want to address anything at the microphone regarding the 408 Russell Avenue historically platted lot? Construction of a home on Russell. Okay. Any additional comments after the flood of new information received? Oh, I'm sorry, Amanda, 603, Mike came in, if that needs to be reflected in a minute. There he is right there. Good Mike.
Yes.
All right, so any other questions, comments? Do I have a motion?
Recommend,
Excuse me, that's not 4A.
No, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Because
Correct.
I can't hardly hear what you're saying. 'Cause when you talk, you not, some people when they talk, they put all their words together. You're not spacing them.
Am I on the microphone? Microphone's on.
Yes.
I'll try to talk a little quieter. All right, or louder, I'm sorry. 4A, Russell Avenue, do I have a motion?
I think she was asking if this was 480 or 4A? 408.
No 4B.
Yeah,
She asked
they're
if it was
talking
4A, she
about
couldn't.
408,
Okay.
an address.
Do you have anything on 4A, the Russell Avenue? No? Okay.
All right, make a motion to recommend approval of the request for construct a dwelling on 408 Russell Avenue as historically platted, legal, non-conforming parcel.
All right, I got a motion. Kevin, was that Joe? Joe had Marshall. Marshall was the second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So, Mr. Creel, that'll be on next week's council agenda for the final okay. Up to you to be there. If you're there, they're going to not say anything. If you're not there, they'll ask all the questions in the world. So.
Okay, I'll be there.
All right, so now we will actually go a little bit out of turn and skip down to 7A to hear the planning department's report on the rezoning. I'm sorry, I'm off. The short-term rental report for 7A. Is that you, Karen?
Yep.
Or is that Wayne?
Yep. Okay, so these are some of the items, and the reason you'll see why this is pertinent to the other rezoning. So, what you have in your memo is just some of the areas that we looked at for potential changes and we evaluated. So one of the first thing we did, and I know we had mentioned to y'all that we did do a survey of all the, we sent a survey to all the current permit holders, and this is only residential short-term rentals that we were dealing with. And we got a fair good, you send out a survey, if you get half the people respond, that's usually good. And in general, things were working fine. There was no complaints with the process. The only problems that they had with renters is smoking in the house when they weren't supposed to, things like that. So we got some good feedback on that. One of the areas, just going through the things that we looked at, the first of which is the fees, and that's pretty obvious. And actually, this was from previous notes, and the direction that we'll more likely go in many cities on the coast have followed the same pattern, is to increase the fees to actually a $500 application fee and match the renewal fee. That serves a few purposes. It does take a lot of sweat equity to process these things and handle them, and Amanda walks them through the process. But also, it's one of these things that it is a business. And we have reached our cap, and now it's a matter of you spend money to make money, and it is a quality thing. And we also do have an average of occupancy that's still pretty good, but there are quite a few that might only rent a couple of times a year, and is at maximizing the number of permits that we have. So, like I said, we're not alone in suggesting this. I think Bay St. Louis, Pass Christian, they all recently increased their fees to that same range. So that's one of the things that we do. We don't know exactly the effect that may have on demand following. We don't know if it will cut down the number of renewals, if people will decide not to, if it will change. Some people did say that it would make a difference in their decision to renew or not. So we'll have to wait that out kind of a year cycle and see what kind of effect that does have to the total number. The other thing, the second bullet that you've got in your memo is what's kind of pertinent to the other discussion, and that deals with, I'm going to talk about two different zones, but this is the existing downtown overlay district that already exists in form in the UDC and has a list of other guidelines and requirements on top of it, as we do have several overlay districts. So the proposal on this is simply for that existing overlay district, which has a mixed bag of all types of commercial and residential inside of it, to change or to add the caveat that residential properties inside this overlay district would not be subject to the cap. They still have to follow all the same residential process, public hearing, but they would not be counted towards the cap since they are in more of a mixed-use area. So that would be another adjustment that would not be made to the short-term rental ordinance, but to the downtown overlay district.
Do you care to even guess, like, distribution of commercial versus residential in that area? I mean, is it 50-50? Is it 60-40 commercial? 60, you know?
In that district, it's primarily commercial. There's only, what about 3 or 4 residential short-term permits?
No. I meant just properties over.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna get to that in a second.
Okay.
I do have quite a bit to say on that. So that's just the overlay district, and we're going to talk about another short-term rental zone, and so I'm going to call that a zone. This is the existing overlay district, so we're not getting them confused. So the only change to the overlay district would be to all the same, any requirements that would apply to a residential short-term rental outside of the district would apply, except it would not count towards the cap. The third thing, there's just three small housekeeping things that just need no change really, but the parts of the current short-term rental ordinance that refer to the revocation process, the specifics on a local property manager, and the requirements for the HOA and covenants, we just need to clarify those because as you all have seen over time, we've had to clarify them through the process of the presenting them to the commission and to discussion on the board. So we're just going to, we have some draft verbiage that we're putting together that you'll see in the ordinance when it does come to you to clarify exactly the conditions and the process that would be involved in a revocation. In the, how many years? 7 years that we've had this ordinance, we've had only recently one property that had a single complaint. And the question was, does this trigger revocation? So we sent a warning and nothing has happened since then. So we're going to clarify exactly how we would handle that. Local property manager was always intended to be an individual. Now there are some companies, or at least some individuals who have formed a company. And so we're going to explore some language to offer to you as far as, does it still have to be an individual, or do they have to have an employee that lives within that same 2 mile? Because the whole purpose of that was to make sure that somebody would be responsive, and that you don't have a company out of New Orleans that's managing this and can't respond to problems. So we're looking at some ways to do that, to still have that, but allow for some companies to participate rather than just individuals.
Question for you.
Yes.
Companies would only be in the short-term rental overlay zone?
No, this is the only thing that the short term, I haven't gotten to the short term. This is all residential short-term rentals. Right now, the requirement is that the local property manager has to have a residence within the 2 miles of the city limits. So, because we always intended that to be a person. But if it is a company, what would we require? And so the requirement might be that the company is located within that same distance, and or an employee that works for them lives in that distance. So we're still kind of tweaking how we would want to word that, but to allow for it to be a company rather than just an individual. So, because that is happening. People have formed companies. Hey, it's a great business opportunity, and they're managing properties. But, and then the covenant requirements, we've gone through that. The way we're handling that now is we are researching to determine whether or not there are filed covenants, rather than just, going back on, is there an active HOA? So what we do for you now is Amanda will go through and look to see if there is covenants filed with the county, which after this came up as in conversation, none of the applications we had after that had filed covenants. So if there's filed covenants, then we would take those into consideration. And if there is an active HOA registered with the Secretary of State's office, then we would take that into consideration. So we're just going to refine that language in the code. Those are more, I've looked at those as kind of housekeeping. Doesn't really change the overall intent. Now, I talked about the existing downtown overlay district. Now I'm going to talk about what we're talking about, creating I'll call it a short-term rental zone. Now, the idea behind this, and that's what you see on your map, is just to create an area. What we did is we mapped out all of the existing short-term rental, the residential permits, the commercial permits, and the boutique hotels that have developed. You got to remember, when we started this ordinance, we didn't have any boutique hotels really. We had the one. We didn't have any commercial short-term rentals. So we wanted to see the distribution of all short-term rental units regardless of zoning. And even when you divide them up into categories and then you combine them together, it doesn't make much difference on the percentage. So we identified this area, which is on the east side, right about Pine, and then coming over to include the downtown area, including the beach. That area right now is about 50% of all residential short-term rentals and a little over 50% of all short-term rentals, regardless of zoning. So the observation on that and the evaluation comes to the conclusion that that's what happened organically. That's what developed without saying, hey, this is where we want them. And it makes sense because this area, that western block, was roughly a quarter or a third of the city, is where you would have most of the walkable tourism. That's where you would have where you more commonly think of a short-term rental. Now, the other short-term rentals serve a different purpose and a different clientele. They're people that are coming in town for family events and just want a quiet place to sleep and aren't necessarily here for downtown events. So because that kind of happened organically, and that does make sense, what we're proposing is to create this zone not for any other difference. It's not that you have more rights or less rights, but to create two separate levels of cap so that we can maintain that proportion. So it's just a tool to say we like the way this kind of developed. It happened naturally. We want to maintain it instead of just increasing the cap overall. Let's make sure that our growth continues to happen in this area where it, is appropriate, still allowing for growth everywhere else, but at the same proportion. So that's where I don't want to mix up the existing downtown overlay district with this cap zone, if you call it. We'll find a good word for it, but coming up with different names. But again, I don't want to call it something we already call something else. So just because it's a lot in the downtown, I don't want to call it a downtown area. It's really just a tiered approach to setting the cap. Now, when we looked at that, there's a couple of different options. If we establish that as a short-term rental density zone, maybe that's what we call it, there are a couple of ways we could do it. Right now, we are sitting at, obviously, our 75 residential permits, and then we have an additional 40 on the waiting list. So if you expanded the cap, and not surprisingly, the waiting list is also divided into basically that same proportion. So even if we added all of the waiting list and expanded the cap to match that, we're still looking at the same distribution. However, that gives us 52% growth in the number of short-term rental units we have throughout the city. So we're not sure if that's really the way to go. So what we're going to do is spell out a few different options, and the final numbers and the final math can be refined. But conceptually, I want you to put this into your head. We can either take what's already permitted and maybe 50% of the waiting list as the cap for now, because we also don't know if any of those existing permitted slots might get freed up if people don't renew, if they don't like the increase in the renewal fees. We don't know what impact that's going to have. So that's one option, is go with obviously your existing number plus half of what's on the waiting list. And one thing to consider on that is even if we said everybody on the waiting list, they're not all going to get permitted at the same time. As you see, even if we bring 5 or 6 of them to you at a time, it's going to take a little while to get through that. So, but this is just about setting the cap. Or we go with all existing plus all waiting list. And then that sets the cap, and that's as far as we go. The question is, do we want to grow that to that many? Do we want to saturate the market quite that much? And then there's also the scenario that you set it to that level and then allow some growth, maybe more growth in the short-term density zone or not. So the first question that I've asked the mayor and a couple of aldermen I've talked to think about really is, do we want this 52% growth that would happen if we made room for everyone that's on the waiting list right now? Is that what is desired? to have an additional, on top of the 75, to have an additional 40. Plus, that doesn't count what may or may not grow in the commercial side. Some of the units that just got rezoned on government there, we don't know how many of those will turn into, how many other spots might come open for some small boutique hotels. So do we want to saturate the market to that level? And if not, do we aim a little bit lower and say, let's just increase it half of the waiting list and try that and see how that works? So that's one approach. And I guess we want you to kind of mull that over and give us some input over the next couple of weeks so we can we're going to bring it back to you next month in an ordinance form. But how we set that cap, we want to really kind of put some thought into. But that's the concept. And if you all are understanding of that concept and on board with that concept, because what it does is it gives us a tool to regulate the growth appropriately and proportionately in different parts of the city. The concern is, too, that if you get a lot of interest in other parts of the city where you have maybe some more middle income or affordable houses, that people start snatching those up for short-term rental, and then your affordable housing stock is impacted. So we don't have the extreme differences that some of the larger cities do, but that's always something that on the far end of concern, do we want to really encourage that? So just something to think about. We like the idea of having the density zone and setting the cap appropriately. It's just how much growth do you feel is good for the city, is in the best interest of the city in this, because we've got a couple more hotels coming in, we've got some growth happening in the commercial sector too that we don't have a cap on. So we don't really know how that's going to work in. Those are the main issues. I'll say the highlight, the points that we feel making adjustments to are appropriate at this time. And if you have any input on them, we can discuss them now. If you want to move on to other things, we can come back to them. But the reason that Andy wanted to move that up is so that you would understand that the existing downtown overlay district would no longer have a cap.
And is that in the blue area or the green area?
The blue.
Blue. Okay.
They overlap, and that's why it gets confusing.
Okay.
But the blue district it already exists in the UDC. So that's why we said, well, we can use that as a tool and just add that as a characteristic of that district is any residential property would not fit under the cap for short-term rentals.
You threw a lot of math out at me.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I can't calculate that fast. So in the existing overlay district, those on a waiting list, how many are in there?
In the downtown overlay district, we've only got what? Three, four.
So those four come out of the 40 automatically.
Correct.
And then you're saying in the short-term overlay district, the green box, about 50% of the 40 is located in that, right?
Right. Okay. And they again would be taken in the order received. And so yes, the yellow ones are the existing permits. The red dots are the commercial permits, and there's a couple of blue squares on there that are the boutique hotels.
And I know you don't go to the far east line of the city limits, but I'm assuming there's no other rentals in those areas.
There was like two. I think when we redid the map, there was a couple out there, but
I think
two or three.
I moved it over a little bit to catch. There's a couple that are right on the edge, but my recollection is that correct. There's nothing further off the map to the east.
Is it safer to say that, or is it safe to say that it's because those neighborhoods are coveted?
I possibly the only one.
There's one on Reynolds, but they don't have active covenants.
No, I would say that the reason that those aren't coming to you is that's just not where the demand is. I mean, these are we didn't dictate this. This is where the people that own the properties decided they wanted to venture into it. And I think from a tourism point of view, you are going to want to be at least somewhat closer to activity, whether it's restaurants or whatnot. I know some people just they want to be out as far away from everything as possible, and they don't want to stay in a hotel. So, but I would say that this shows that most of the people coming here for short-term stay want to at least have easier access to more of the tourism type activities.
And just one point of clarification, I think you said that the increase would go to $500 because you have
Yes.
$400.
Yes, yeah. That was, I had two different sets of notes, and through discussions with the mayor and others, we had, said 500.
So 500 is the number.
That would be the proposed number, yeah.
So you're proposing that the downtown overlay would be no cap, and then you would tier the short-term rental area and versus the other area outside that.
Correct. Basically create a density zone. And I won't even say create a density zone, reflect what's already there.
And how does this correlate with the timeline of going in front of the Board of Aldermen with a recommendation? Are we talking we're going to be able to do that next month, or are we going to talk about it's going to be being pushed farther after advertising?
Now, we would, the plan is to advertise for an ordinance. This is just to present the concepts, make sure that we were all kind of understanding of the concepts, and come back to you next month with a draft ordinance to reflect these.
To go to the board?
To come to you all. Yeah, both come to you all.
But it has to be
It's still be made.
Right.
for the board, so they would get.
Right. I'm going to give them an update at either the next meeting or the meeting after that before the ordinance, just so that they also understand the concepts. But I've also been kind of talking to them one-on-one to get their input into what their concerns are with the current ordinance. But they will be kind of updated to say, listen, we presented these concepts to the Planning Commission before we went to the actually crafting the ordinance language. But like I said, any input that you think of between now and the next week or so, we'll kind of include, and I'm working on how it fits into the ordinance, into the UDC document. But those are really the biggest things. I think that between the fee increase, which, like I said, this is not just coming from us. Every city that has kind of been on this journey with us is doing the same thing to either $400 or $500, and it's not slowing down the interest. But
And I support that just simply because of the services that are needed in order to carry out the application process. I mean, that's fine.
Right.
My only concern is that, and I hate to use the word kicking the can down the road, but are we waiting too long to get this in front of the mayor and the board before there's a strong recommendation from us?
well, I'm going to give them an update. I'm going to give them an update just like I'm giving to you.
I'd like to see one of two things happen.
Mhm.
Either we do another meeting of just the planning commission before the draft is proposed so that we can provide input, or do some sort of online collaboration tool where we can provide input. So when you start talking about how to tier these things, we're involved in it so that we're not waiting to the next meeting to say, oh, this doesn't look good at all.
Because we're getting hit up left and right,
I
as you guys are too.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're getting hit up left and right on what's going to happen, what's the next step, and if we keep saying, well, it's going to be advertised, it's going to be next meeting, it's going to be the next meeting, it just
Well, I mean, it's a spilt milk issue right now because by statute, we can't do it before May at this point.
Yeah.
The only thing I guess we could do is just throw a off the cuff cap change tonight, but even that I don't know if we can do.
And we could fit in some special call meetings too. Yeah, I mean,
Work session,
this a work session to really kind of go through the meat.
When does the ordinance have to be? I'm sorry, not the ordinance. Well,
The
I guess
advertisement?
The public hearing advertisement for our April meeting. What's the deadline?
So you got about a week.
March 23rd.
March 23rd is the deadline to advertise. So we really need to get that on the books.
Mhm.
We
I
have
mean,
to have that.
it could just be an email with your first draft, and we provide input back to that.
I have to see what I can do and not
Can we
violate.
not recommend the no cap, that area, and then come back with the other portion, the tiered? Because that seems like that's going to be something that you need to work on, is the tiered, how you're going to do the tiers. But could we do a recommendation for the no cap for the overlay?
I guess what I would say tonight is if you are good with everything, all the other concepts, then as far as the tier, if you're good with the area that you see in the map, I have a whole spreadsheet of different combination of numbers, and I was not going to throw that at you tonight. So if you understand conceptually how we could work with it, because I also have to come up with a top number, a combined number that's not going to overwhelm staff. And by staff, I mean Amanda. I don't want to break her brain.
Before we get to that, we do have our next
Right.
agenda item.
We can come back and
I'd
discuss
like to
it
hear
further.
from anybody who might have objections to that before we made a proposal on just an unlimited cap.
Here in a minute, you can make a motion to table
Yeah, we can bring, the only reason you wanted to bring it up now is so that you would understand the overlay district and how it relates to this next item.
Okay, I have one question. I want to get some more data on this. You want to get the other thing out of the way and then come back to this?
No,
Because we
I'm
got
saying,
more questions.
I'm saying I don't want to make a recommendation on anything.
I understand
Until I've
that,
heard
but I got
from-
a lot more questions. You want to get
I do
that
too.
for now?
Yeah.
You want to do that after you hear the one item that we skipped over?
I think in the interest of the people that are only here for that, let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that and then come back to this. Is that all
Do
right?
I have a motion to
Yeah.
table discussion of 7A until after we hear item 4? I've lost 4A, 4B. Got a motion by Matthew to
Second.
table this discussion. Second by everybody. I heard Joe last. We'll say last was first today. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we will resume talking about short-term rentals on hold after item 4B. This is going to be a public hearing, a little bit more formal process. This is a public hearing for 813 General Pershing Avenue, parcel ID 60119394000. Michael Fritz is requesting a rezoning from the RD 2-family residential district to the CMX1 neighborhood commercial mixed-use district. Do I have a motion to go with the public hearing?
So moved.
So moved. I got
Mike?
Mike and
Joey.
Kevin. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are in a public hearing. We will start off by hearing from Wade.
Okay. The property in question, 813 General Pershing, you can see it on the screen there. It's the green square in the middle. As you pointed out, it is in the RD 2-family residential district. To the north of it is a undeveloped parcel, also RD. South of it is a single-family dwelling, RD district. To the west is a undeveloped city-owned property, and further in the RD district. To the east of this, across General Pershing, is the 1515 government property and the warehouse, existing warehouse for Ocean Springs Lumber, owned by Moran Realty. In that warehouse, there are some other entities, some other offices, uses, and things like that sort in that building. Just want to point out that the planning staff is not supporting this zoning change for the following reasons. One is that the property does abut RD 2-family zoning on both three sides. It's approximately 300 feet from the Government Street commercial corridor. In our looking at this, there are 8 residentially zoned parcels on the west side of General Pershing, totaling frontage about 490 feet, and this particular lot takes up only 10% of that total frontage. Second reason for is that the application states that the intended use is for vacation rental, and the aldermen have instructed the staff, as we discussed in the previous discussion, to research the current situation with short-term rentals in all residential districts, and we'll be discussing options after we have discussed options for changing that total number. From that standpoint, that would resolve, if that amendment is approved, that would resolve the intended use of this property for a short-term rental. So from that standpoint, as I said, that we're not supporting the rezoning. If it is the y'all's conclusion that the General Pershing has changed in character due to changes in Government Street and the potential plans for development at 1515 across the street, if you conclude that that is worthy of a rezoning study, then we would look into undertaking that study. It would have to be at the instruction of the alderman, of course, but we would look at undertaking that study and bringing back to you a recommendation for a possible rezoning of this site of General Pershing. We'd have to contact the property owners, see if they're interested in it, get their input. But that is an option, and like I said, if your conclusion that is the logical way to move forward, then we could do that. I think that concludes everything I've got. If you'd like to ask some questions, I'll be glad to address them. Thank you.
Does anybody have anything for Wade on his report? Questions, comments, concerns? All right, so the way this is going to work, the applicant has already jumped my whistle. The applicant will have a little while to tell us about the application. I'll then call for any public input, either in favor of or in against to, and then we will let the applicant speak to any of the public comment, and then we'll close the public hearing on it. As a matter of housekeeping, the public comments, we do ask you keep it under 3 minutes apiece. And if somebody says something and they sum it up perfectly, just come in and say, I agree 100% with them. And that way we'll have 2 people on the record saying the same thing. Before the applicant gets started, we received, and I'll ask for y'all's input on distribution too, but we did receive 3 letters that weren't in our packet at this meeting. I'm reading them as to say we have a letter from Fred Moran, the Ocean Springs Lumber letterhead, and a letter from Kenneth Finnegan and Carrie Branch that to me are very specific to this application. The other 3 I think are more specific to item 7A, so we'll come back to those. Does everybody kind of agree with the first one?
Second. Oh,
So, Carrie Branch was in the folder. I think the others were on top. The Carrie Branch and the Fred Moran are both, in the summary, are both in support of the rezoning request. So if y'all agree with my distribution of letters received, then I would take a motion to accept them in the minutes.
Make a motion to accept the Ocean Springs Lumber submitted by Fred Moran and the Gary Branch letter into the minutes.
For this item. All right, I have a motion by Kevin, and then got a second by Marshall. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so for the audience, all we did, we got 2 letters. We just now have those in the permanent record, as they say. Does the applicant wish to speak? Name and address at the microphone.
Certainly, my name is Donovan Scruggs. I'm at 317 Pine Drive here in Ocean Springs. I'll jump into this as fast as I can and speak through this process as quickly as I can, but there is a lot to say. The application was submitted, it's for rezoning, but unfortunately your application says what's the intended use. So whether I'm going to do a drugstore, Walmart, or a vacation rental, they asked, we had to say. So the intent is vacation rental. Of course, vacation rental currently, as of today, is not permitted in this district because of the cap. So we cannot do it. So we are looking at, what was the route to go. The rezoning would be a no-brainer if we did not use the word short-term rental. That's kind of made everything cloudy here. But as Carolyn said, a short-term rental is a business. It is a business, which is in conflict with what Wade said, which said, I think 80% or 90% of the property on this side of Pershing is residential. So which one is it? Is it residential or is it business? It doesn't really matter whether it's a business or residential. What really matters is, has there been a change in neighborhood character? And how do you say anything other than yes? I don't know if y'all watch Tuesday night Board of Alderman meetings for the fun of it. Sometimes I do. It's very entertaining. Last week they talked about a $33 million investment on this property that's across the street from this particular site. They are talking about TIF. They're talking about tax abatement. The city is talking about doing everything they can to incentivize growth. I think the right away is 30 feet. So it's not 50 feet away. It's like 30 feet away. It's literally across the street from this development, $33 million. $33 million is a Walmart. That's the kind of investment that they're talking about. I believe the number of hotel rooms that they're talking about on the site is 32 hotel rooms. 32 hotel rooms. That's probably more hotel rooms than there are in Ocean Springs. We don't have a lot of hotels. 14 condos. Of those, how many do you think is going to be short-term rentals? I don't know what the game plan is, but I guarantee you 50%, if not 14 of them will be short-term rentals. 8,800 square feet of dining, 32,000 square feet of garage, and that garage will open up every day in front of this house, in front of this unit. Is that not a change in neighborhood character? Looking across the street, seeing cars in and out of the parking garage every day. This defines change in neighborhood character. It is, I think I saw Murky Waters is finally opening after a 2-year build out. 2 years to build this, Murky Waters on this location. How long is it going to take to build this across the street from this unit? And you know who complains about loud noises more than businesses? Residents. So if people are living here, renting, paying $2,000, $3,000 a month, $1,500 a month, whatever the going rate is, and they're long-term rentals, they've got to listen to this noise on a routine basis. When you're a hotel, you kind of are used to going to downtown areas, and you're used to hearing a little, noises here and there. But to watch this kind of construction across the street from me, or for instance every day, and say there's been no change in neighborhood character, but yet you can't get out of your driveway because there is construction workers across the street from you, is going to be not only a change in neighborhood character, but a headache for the neighborhood. It's a great development. We're all for it. Don't get me wrong. I think this is going to be a game changer for Ocean Springs. If it's a game changer for Ocean Springs, certainly it's a game changer for General Pershing. I mean, Jesus, it's across the street from us. How can you say that it's not going to be a change in neighborhood character? Now, I know the staff report talked a little bit about spot zoning, and I really have an issue with that in the sense that your definition, the definition that you're required to go by, is the one that's in the ordinance. And the ordinance defines spot zoning as a zoning that is small in neighborhood character. It's only for individual use, but it's also incompatible with surrounding uses and zoning districts. The difference between a RD and a CMX1 is one slight change, one step. Those are two of the most compatible districts within the city. So to say a RD is incompatible with the CMX1 is just not accurate. Is RD compatible with M1? Probably not. That's a pretty big change. That's one end of the spectrum to the other. But the small district associated with this particular site is something that needs to happen to help create a transitional area between these more intense districts of the CMX2 and the M1. CMX1 allows single-family residential. It's one of the only zoning districts that actually allows single-family residential. So I think it's very consistent with the adjacent properties. Now, this is a side of, this is not a hit against Ocean Springs Lumber. They're a great business, and I spend way too much money there every week. But, that's a truck going to my house probably for the stuff I bought that I don't need. But it's these large freight 18-wheelers that are not typical to residential areas. I mean, Mike, I don't think you have one in your neighborhood on a regular basis. This is actually across the street from this house. I mean, this is on the street of this house every day, multiple times a day. This whole corridor, I agree with Wade, needs to be CMX1. Now, we've known this for a long time. We actually reached out to the Pleasants and asked them would they entertain a change, and they're not interested. So if Wade, if part of your process of seeing your study to see if the rezoning needs to occur on this is ask Pleasant if they want to rezone, the answer according that they gave me was no. So so the study is really going to lead nowhere. So the question is, have we met the minimal requirements for rezoning based on where we are today? And in my opinion, yes. This question is going to be even more so answered yes in 2 or 3 months when 1515 Government Street is under construction. We do want to do a short-term rental, but we can't do that with the RD district. I've jumped around a lot. I've gotten here's a good little slide. Let me do this real quick and I'll shut up. This is a progression of growth that's occurred. Back when I started with the city back, I don't know, 40 years ago, it seems like, downtown more or less ended at Phoenicians. In fact, when Phoenicians was opened up, we said, you'll never make it this far down. You're way too far, east of downtown to actually make it. Look at what's changed. Look at the way this has grown. Every year, we've got more and more businesses going further down this direction. So much so that they're about to build a 800 square foot parking garage across the street from us to accommodate this growth. So it's a good bit of growth that's happening. And y'all even rezoned the CMX1, CMX2 Swingsters lot not too long ago. These red dots on this show all of the changes that have occurred within this immediate area. It's a pretty good bit. Now, to let y'all know what we're doing is not atypical. Zoning is typically done in the rear of lots. It is this way you have lots on both sides of the street being the same. Think of Bowen Avenue. You ride down Bowen, you got residential on both sides. You drive down Government, on both sides of Government you have commercial. The zone changes behind the street so that everything on the street remains consistent. That's kind of what we're asking for here. If everybody on the west side of General Pershing is looking at commercial, they should also be commercial. I think it's very, it would be a good idea to rezone this area, but let's start with us and then use my example as a change in neighborhood character for future rezonings. Now, the image at the bottom shows a number of small transitional districts, very small single lot or very small districts that were created to have buffer areas or transition areas between other districts. This one on the far right was done by most of you not too long ago. It was rezoned from residential to CMX2, and I think it's surrounded on 3 sides by residential as well. So it's almost just like this property, and it was rezoned. The property across from Todd Boswell's is a small CMX1 that transitions from a CMX2 to a R1 district. So what we're asking for is something the city has done multiple times in the past. And we think this is even a better example than those because of what's occurring at 1515.
I'm about to wrap.
I'm done. Yeah, I'm done. I could do this for a while. Y'all can look at that one. This is surrounding uses. It does fit, but just all we're asking for is a rezoning to CMX1, so we can do a commercial use to be determined. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Actually, go back a slide if you don't mind. Just public need. I just want to read what you have there.
Oh, public need.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll give you a chance to bookend it if you need to address anything.
All right, gentlemen. I appreciate the extra time. Like I said, sometimes I get a little long-winded.
I'm sorry, I didn't ask you. Do you have any questions for Donovan right now? No.
Just a small one, sir.
Okay,
How much parking is there?
I believe there right now is 4 spaces.
That's what I was thinking. 2 for the top, 2 for the bottom?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because not a lot of room for a business, I would think.
Well, the great thing about us is we are adjacent to a parking garage on one side and a parking lot behind us. We have an alley that feeds us to the rear, so that if necessary, we could provide additional parking on the rear side of the property. So we could accommodate the number of parking spaces needed for a business.
Right.
One more thing I thought of. I promise this is it. The RD district, our lot size is non-conforming. We lack the area for the RD district. I think we're required to have 10,000 square feet. We have about less than 6,000.
7,500.
Right.
Okay.
We don't meet the 7,500. So guess what? CMX1 will be consistent, compliant with the district.
Gotcha. All right. So, ma'am, you were here to speak on this, correct? The rezoning on the General Pershing. That was the one you were interested
I
in?
was just listening to what y'all was, I'm just listening for now.
Okay. All right, so
Before y'all close it down, then I'll say what I have to say.
I'll let you know. All right, so anybody else in the audience want to speak in, let's start with opposition and against this rezoning. Anybody in the audience against rezoning of general Pershing? Anybody in the audience want to speak in favor of this application? Anybody in the audience want to speak to this application at all? So I'm about to close public hearing, so if you don't speak now, you'll forever
What I
hold your
want to
peace.
say, after y'all do all this rezone, you want me to stand up?
Yes, ma'am, we need your name and name and address at the microphone for the record, and then Amanda needs it at the microphone too to hear. Name and address, please.
Lottie Gibson, 821 General Pershing. After all this rezoning, then y'all did all this work. Okay, what about the residents that's in there? The taxes, y'all say y'all accumulate all these taxes and everything, but what about the residents that's in there? Is the taxes gonna go up? Y'all gonna keep it just like it, when they bought their land, the purpose of them buying the land, when they bought it was for their grandkids and their kids. So what y'all gonna do about that? Since y'all have all this going on, so y'all gonna have everything y'all need, so the people that's there, I guess they pay the same thing they've been paying since they residential. Is that what y'all gonna do?
I'm gonna defer, you answer that question better. Ultimately, it's the county though, right?
The county sets the tax rates, but if they only change the zoning of the one property, when that property gets reassessed, it should only affect theirs. It's based on the use and zoning, and that's kind of the extent, because the county does that.
Okay.
We don't do that. But it shouldn't. I mean, we're only talking about rezoning the one property, not every. I mean, if that's the request that's on the table tonight. Yes, your zoning does impact how they assess it, which I could not explain how, but it does have an effect. That would be, we can give you contact information to talk to somebody at the county.
I need the information, and I need it wrote down, and I need a signed statement that that's what y'all gonna do when all this rezoning is dead. That those are the taxes that y'all gonna charge people. Other than that, what you're saying, what you're gonna do, and what you're gonna do is two different things.
Well, the county sets all the tax rates. That doesn't come through the city at all. All we do is adjust the zoning district, which says what you can and can't do on that property.
So before y'all do that, y'all gonna know the county, when the county do this, before y'all do all this voting and everything, y'all gonna know what the people gonna pay that's already been there 100 years and 30 years and 40 years and 50 years, 60 years. So if the county do that and y'all vote on it, then what does that leave the people that's there?
Our votes have nothing to do with taxes, I believe is what she's saying. We don't have any control over that. It should not, in theory, it should not affect anybody else.
It should not. And they assess,
But it should not. But it should not, and that's two different things.
There are a lot of things that the county considers, and I really don't know. That's why Amanda can give you information.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, she can tell you who to talk to.
No, before y'all vote, y'all need to know what the people in there that's been there all their life, and some of them been there long, and most all y'all that's here, I know people that's been in there way before y'all got. You need to know before you start voting on something. How would y'all feel if it was your parents or your grandparents? So how would you feel? You wouldn't feel good. It's just, I don't need that. But just vote on your conscience and let God take care of the rest.
All right, thank you. Anybody else in the audience want to speak either in favor of or against or any other?
I'd like to speak.
Name and address at the microphone.
Come again?
Name and address up at the microphone, please.
Yeah, my name is Yahya Muhammad. My address is 1704 Davis Street, and I have another piece of property joining that property. What she talking about on, or where they live at, right off General Pershing on the next street.
Okay.
What she talking about? She don't know all the rules of how you all do business. When you make a change, then that qualifies that neighborhood for another change. So I'm just saying, we don't want to change. We don't want it. She don't want it, and I don't want it. I'm speaking for her too, because I know she don't understand that. That's my sister's daughter. That's my niece. So she don't know. She don't understand how this thing works. You know, I'm pretty familiar with how it works. So we don't want to change. Now that don't mean we won't stop it, but we don't want it. We want that on the record that we don't want to change to commercial. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, anybody?
Can I ask you a question, sir?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any objection to a different property on the same street, not y'all's property, but them changing their zoning? Not affecting your properties at all, but somebody else's property changing their zoning
To what?
to commercial light use?
Yeah, we have a problem. Yeah, we have a problem because when you make a change, it qualifies it for another change later on. So yeah, I'm against that. I don't want any of it changed to commercial.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else in the audience want to speak? Donovan, I'll give you 3 minutes if you need a dispute or speak or anything else. 3 minutes. I'm going to set a timer.
I'll tell you, the individual contact is Nick Elmore. Nick's a big help, and the way Nick is going to look at it is that the similar properties that are zoned RD. So, the property that's behind them, your property, sir, Macedonian Baptist Church property, some of the properties that are within the railroad district are going to be those that are considered similar. They're not going to rezone. They're not going to assess that property at the same rate they do commercial property or the property at 1515 Government Street. So I can't tell you what, as all property in the railroad district and downtown goes up in value, there will be some. I assume your mother's going to qualify for homestead exemption, and she's probably over 63. So there are things that are associated with her tax that's going to be very low. But ultimately, Ocean Springs value goes up. They don't hit existing residential property that does not change hands nearly as hard as they hit property that routinely flips. My neighbor sells her property 4 or 5 times. It's going to be assessed at a higher rate than mine. My property that's been held by us for a number of years really does not change that much. So don't sell your property, hold on tight to it, and the values will not go up like other properties. Thank you very much.
All right, before we close public hearing, anybody else want to engage the public? Anything we heard need to be readdressed? If not, do I have a motion to close public hearing?
So moved.
All right, motion Kevin, second by Mike, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we are out of public hearing. Still, anybody have any questions, comments, any thoughts they want on the record? Feel free to chime in, commissioners. I'll just throw one thing out there. It's been said. I think the unfortunate thing on this is that it's getting the property rezoned and the short-term residential is confusing the matter. I always try to look at the property, not the use for rezoning, because to Donovan's point, I mean, this thing could be an office within a week if if the board accepts the rezoning on it. So it is unfortunate with the timing.
I do think, though, that being the examples he gave that have been done recently, I mean, to be consistent, there's no reason for not rezoning this property.
I mean, the city built a parking lot right behind it because of the eastward expansion of downtown, so I'm kind of leaning in your direction as well.
And to take this back to 7.A, I guess it is.
Yeah.
This would be one of the properties that would be affected in the downtown overlay district.
Yes.
Is that correct?
It would no longer, if that is approved, that it would no longer be under the cap.
Right. But it couldn't be used. It would have to be still a residential only use,
Right.
and on a whether or not there's been a change of character. So
I will say I'm not in favor of doing the study to rezone the entire street. I think each property owner should make that decision on their own.
I agree.
Question, Carolyn.
Yes.
When is the city going to look at all the zoning throughout the city and do a reassessment? I know it's about every 10 years.
it's kind of a part of the comprehensive plan.
What we'll do, the comprehensive plan is underway right now as far as being updated, and once that comes out, then we can look and see how that should be applied to various areas.
It won't address zoning, but it'll be like
It'll
future
address
land
use
use.
trends.
It's kinda,
So we would want that in place and updated before we undertook that.
So that's the first time, or no, it's not the first time, but so it is formally, like we have a consultant and they're working and
Oh, yeah,
they're
it's
typing on their
underway.
computers. Okay, I thought that was the case. Do we have any idea on schedule? I know we've been talking about it.
I don't know a timeline.
I've talked to him recently, and there's not a firm schedule on it. Maybe sometime on into the summer.
Okay. One thing, so I did try to look at the comprehensive plan about this property, and I'd like to just make sure we get a very clear future land use map, because the existing one is very good. The future one's like, I have no idea what I'm looking at here. So I'm sure that technology is advanced anyway, but yeah,
A little
do us
bit.
favor, make sure make sure we can read the future land map. You know, globally it's easy, but when you look at it from parcel to parcel, it's like I can't see.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else got any questions, comments, concerns? If not, anybody want to make a motion?
I want to make a motion. I want to make a motion to recommend approval of the rezoning of the 813 General Pershing Avenue from the RD2 Family Residential District to the CMX1 Neighborhood Commercial Mixed Use District to, as, what's I'm supposed to say right there?
Change of character.
As change of character of the neighborhood as determined
And a public need.
at a public need. Yeah,
I'll
that's
second.
Okay, I have a motion by Joey and a second by Kevin to rezone. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? No opposed? Motion carries. That will be re-advertised, which means it'll get pushed to
April this.
April.
Wherever the first Tuesday. What did you say
April
that?
4th.
We do it on April 1st just for fun.
I'm not working on a Saturday, but yeah.
All right, so April 4th will be final determination. Donovan, I think you probably knew that, but please plan on being there. All right, so where did my agenda go? I think we're back down to coming back around. I'm sorry. Before we go back to the discussion, does anybody in the audience want to speak about non-agenda items, just anything in general? Usually they don't. All right, let's come back around to item, I guess, commissioner forum, so we stay in turn. Anybody got anything up here before we go back to 7? Once, twice sold. Marshall?
Are we back to what we were talking about earlier? now?
We're going to, I think we went
Commissioner
to.
forum now. Do you have anything outside of?
Well, I'll pass for this week.
All right. Let's get back down to item 7A and continue that discussion.
Okay.
I'm sorry, before we do that, let's, so we had the other 3 letters, so I've got one with the Sullivan Law Firm heading, and then I've got 2 from Fritz, have similar data attached, mostly geared towards like short-term rental data and Ocean Springs data and all that. I understand a lot of people probably didn't have time to read everything from Fritz in particular. However, I was going to entertain a motion to accept these into the minutes.
So moved.
Got a motion by Kevin, second by Mike. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? And it seems like we'll have time to digest the Fritz thing before any actual whatever anyway. So I encourage everybody to read those at your leisure. So, all right, back to 7A. Marshall, I know you had some questions.
Yeah, I
Kick us off.
a little slow and confused. You covered a lot of stuff that
Yeah.
wasn't in our packet, right?
Well, no, this was all in the memo that's in there. It's all listed.
Not in my memo. You must have it.
No,
She filled in the gaps.
I filled in the gaps. I mean,
Yeah, you go.
it was a lot of words. It would have been very wordy, and
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to really discuss it.
I'll go back and you put in a lot of detail where you filled in the gaps. There are a lot of big gaps in there, I guess, okay?
Yep.
So everything you went over with all the detail, if you could give us that in a real short
Yeah.
email,
Let me-
that would be very helpful.
Okay. I can recap it in a follow up that comes from this. Basically say this is what we talked about. I think that the important things are, and the one complicated thing is how to distribute a cap, how to make sure that we looked at the distribution of the existing, how that developed naturally, and how do we maintain that distribution? Because I really do feel that it developed that way because both of the need and the appropriateness.
Okay, point of clarification
Yes.
before we do this. The commercial district does not have a cap, is that correct?
That's one of the things that we're proposing is not the commercial district. It's very, words important.
As of today, yes.
As of today, the downtown overlay district doesn't address short-term rentals. What we're saying is that the downtown overlay district would now say that residential properties in that district would not fall under the
He's
cap.
just talking about today. It doesn't matter where it is. Any commercial short-term.
Oh, yes,
rental
yes.
has no cap.
As no cap, correct.
So there's not a commercial district, or there is one that should be on the map here?
No, there is not a commercial, it's commercially zoned property.
Okay.
That a commercial
was
short-term
never clear
rental.
in my-
Yeah.
That's mine.
Yeah.
Okay. So, where we see all the red dots are commercial properties.
Correct.
They're not.
They're
So,
commercially zoned.
this would continue under your new proposal, the
Correct.
commercial thing would continue as is.
Correct.
Okay. And then you're saying there would be a difference between a downtown overlay and this new proposed thing, or?
There would be, okay, I'm gonna say three different things. The downtown overlay district would address, as we said, with no cap on their residential short-term rentals. And then what I would like to call this is basically a short-term rental density zone.
Right.
I don't want to get it confused with the downtown overlay district. So, so the short-term rental density zone currently contains 50% of the total
Right.
of the whole city, and that applies to the short-term rentals, the boutique hotels, and then when you combine, well, actually all the boutique hotels are in this zone, but the commercial, when you add up the commercial, residential, and boutique hotels, this zone still has just over half of all the short-term rental activity in it. But it's about 47% of residential short-term rental permits at this time. But when we looked at the waiting list, it also divides about in that same proportion, which tells me that that's kind of where the need and the desire is for this unit. So what we wanted to do is, instead of just saying raise the cap to X number, we wanted to make sure that there was some sort of tool that allowed us to maintain this same distribution.
Okay, final point of clarification.
Yes.
You go to $500 for the renewal fee. That would be effective some date in the future.
It would be effective with the ordinance.
With the ordinance,
Yes.
okay. So then everybody that currently has a short-term rental crew would get a letter saying either you pay the renewal fee or you lose your
Right.
life.
When their next renewal comes up, they can choose to renew or not. Yeah. Yeah, it wouldn't be like immediately they have to pay it. It'd be like, if you're due set for renewal in 6 months, you have till then to decide, do you want to pay the additional?
Yeah, but there'd be some kind of letter go out.
Yeah,
everybody. Okay, cool,
Yeah, yeah.
I understand now.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
So kind of in a nutshell, there's the fee, there's the overlay district, there's the housekeeping verbiage clarifications that we'd like to make. But then the real, egg in the basket is this cap. So if we're not creating the zone, the way I see it is this density zone kind of created itself. Okay, so if we recognize that that's where all the existing and growth seems to be wanted and needed, the cap would then be just set in 2 tiers. Now, how we do that right now, we've got 75 distributed in the way that I described. If we added, just to give you the exact numbers, all of the waiting list that we currently have, we would have a total of 114, which I would say round that up because 114 is a terrible number to have as a cap. It needs to be an even, but say even if you did round it to 120 just to make it an even denominator, that would you could put 60 in the zone and 60 in the rest of the city. What that would do is allow a few more in the zone that are currently on the waiting list, but that would accommodate exactly what is on the waiting list for the rest of the city.
All right, I need to hear it again. So you would say one cap, but 50's in there and 50's out of there?
Yes.
Okay.
It's basically you would have it tiered so that Amanda looks at the address and said, okay, this area has so many left in it. And that would ensure that our growth in this area, that the proportion stays the same because it seems to be a healthy distribution for the activity.
My math is you would add 20 more into the new district you're talking about, right?
Correct.
And then you would add 20 more throughout the rest of the city. We currently have how many?
Yeah, we currently...
How many we have in the district now on waiting list?
Currently, we have 34 permits, and then 20 on the waiting list in the zone.
Okay.
And then the balance of that is, so you have 34 out of 75 are in the zone, and 20 out of 39 or 20 out of 40 from the waiting list are in the zone.
So you grow 10 more in that district under this proposal,
right?
And then in the others, you have a little bit more room for growth.
Yeah, I mean, there's, the first thing that we looked at is, let's raise the cap to the number of what, that we have on the waiting list. And that's what that would do. It would be a total of 114, okay, maybe at least rounded to 115. And it pretty evenly distributed in the zone and outside the zone. And that is one option. Let's just accommodate the requests that we have on the table, knowing that with the fee increase, there may be some that don't renew, and maybe that's all we'll ever need as a cap. The other options, it's like, okay, just the scenario, if you didn't want everybody on the waiting list to have a spot, if you didn't want to add that many, because that's a 50% increase in the number of short-term rentals that we have. So just, okay, exploring all of the options. If you didn't want to have that much increase in the availability of short-term rental units, you can set the number slightly lower. But those are kind of the options. Do you want to meet the current demand? Do you want to underneath it a little bit and see what happens? Or do you want to allow room for growth? So,
how long will it take us to process those applications? I mean, because are we going to have the same conversation in 2 months again, or are we?
It took, how long did it take us to catch up last time?
4 or 5 days. Good 6 or 7 months.
It would take us at least 7 months to get all of these processed, at least. And that's because we can't do them. They all have to be inspected. They all have to go through public hearings. So there's, only so many that we can process at a time. And you will go through every planning commission having 5 or 6 on each agenda, just like we have before. That's the only way we can catch up. So it won't be overnight. They'll still wait in line and, take them in the order that they were received and whatnot.
Well, we could probably handle it with like a grouping. I don't know if that'd be legal or not. However, it doesn't help the fire department and the police department and everybody that's going to do these.
I was going to say, we need to trickle them into you because it's a lot of the mail outs and
How do they do there? Do they not do the inspections until
they're ready?
Permit comes up or whatever, so
Yeah.
they're off the waiting list?
Yeah. In fact, we had been taking applications, and then after a point, we said, listen, just wait and turn in an application when it gets closer. But we did, even the ones that we have applications, we didn't take their application fee until it's time. So, we jump on as soon as this is official, then we would get on that and start processing it. And it's not just the order that it's received, it's the order who's ready for their inspection.
How does time negatively or positively affect allowing more applicants?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
Like, how does this time, this spread out, how does that affect which scenario we do?
Well, I don't think it does. I'm just saying that, if for some reason we increased increased it to 120, I don't want to come back here at the end of the summer and have to have the same conversation again about raising it to 150,
Because it's going to take that long to process them.
Yes. Well, it's probably going to take longer. I mean, I don't think
it's probably going to take. That's being,
unless we come up with a different system.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's pretty intensive, but it seems to work because we kind of weed out. There's a lot of things that have to be followed in order to ensure quality, and it takes a minute, but it seems to be working. So
I personally don't like the idea of us just allowing the ones that have turned to applications, because you just said that you stopped taking applications.
Well, no, we kept we didn't actually take the application form, but we put their name on a list. So that represents the number of people that are on the list.
Even the people that are on the list.
Yes,
that's
everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, we just said don't bother taking the time to fill it out. Let's, your name is next in line on the list, but when it gets closer, we'll send you an application to fill it out. So it's a economic thing, I guess. Do you want to meet? We also had between, I think, February and now, or the end of January and now, the number on the waiting list. I think a lot of people just put their name on the waiting list because it was just like this wave that came in when they knew that this was coming up. So how many of those may actually come to fruition? Not sure. There's a lot of people wanted to get in line.
Increase of the fee.
Right.
And with the increase of the fee, though, I mean, are we making any recommendations to the board that increase in fee goes toward those resources in order to make that process a little quicker?
That's one thing we can,
Sounds like we're just trying to cover the resources we're already.
Right.
Right, but, so-
Yeah. In order to make them go quicker, we'd have to hire more people. I mean, that's, and so would I love to have more people on staff? Absolutely. But it's one of those things that you still have to take, the time, your time, the public hearing that have to happen, the mail outs.
The public hearing and the mail outs and the public, the board, that alone takes a month and a half. That's not adding your inspection and everything else.
Right. That's if you're ready for inspection that day.
I used my calculator on this one, so to make sure I got the number right. So at 120 and $500, that's $60,000 in revenue.
That's definitely a good point to make to them, and I would love to have that and say, can you give me more staff? It sounds wonderful, whether it's right or wrong, I like it.
So what do you need from us? You need us to make a recommendation on one of those three options?
We don't need a vote. This is basically to get input from you, and even if you want to sleep on it and send us an email to say, these are the things that we're looking at. We're in the process of kind of drafting the language now. But we wanted to kind of have this conversation with you first before we came back and said, here's your public hearing on this ordinance change, so that we wouldn't have to go back and forth. And
we can change the ordinance at the meeting.
Within certain parameters,
yeah.
The number, and I know that Will would have to lay in, if you're changing it from 115 to 120, that might be a minor change, and then we still have to have a public hearing in front of the board. So a minor change like that could happen from one meeting to the next, yes.
Okay. Let me jump in, and I'm going to get to what Joey's asking too on my end. But a couple of things I just wanted to note, like, do we have to have the green line overlap the blue line? Wouldn't it be cleaner if the green line just kind of followed the same whatever as the blue line? Because then we're not talking about this cap, but this cap doesn't count for that cap because it's also in the blue and the green.
Well, the zone is bigger than the overlay district, and we're not changing the overlay district. That addresses a lot of other things other than short-term
take
rental.
a new green line and just stay out of the downtown zone. That way we're not having.
You're saying take the green line and kind of bring it over to the east to get that little wayward little.
Then we have a green. Well, take the green and just.
Yes, we didn't do that because there's no residential property in there, so it really didn't.
No. I'm talking.
I think what he's saying is
take the green line and just follow the blue line this way. That way it's A or B, not A, B, A plus B. It just seems like it'd be a little cleaner. You can think on.
Yeah, well, it's two different things.
So
two different things.
I wanted to see, I know we had the survey, did we get results? I mean, are they quantified? Can we get a copy of some of the results?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can give that to you. Essentially,
so a couple of the reasons
take it for whatever it's worth that I can, read them to you. We just kind of asked how often, like, what's their occupancy rate, how many weeks a month, or, how many months a year are they? And 46% said that they rent the equivalent of between 15 and 21 days per month. So that's pretty good. And that's with, we had 40% response? Something like that. We have had about a little less than half of the permit holders respond to our survey.
I forget the survey questions, but was the question asked, would they support an increase in?
Yes, we did ask, would that change their decision or impact their decision on renew? And I'm looking for it. I know you wrote that down for me, Amanda. I think only a few of them said that it would change their.
It was very few.
Yeah.
Because, that's one of the things I was curious about. I'm actually, and I hate to even say this in public, but I support raising the fee. I hate government fees, but I do think we're losing a lot of viable short-term rentals on a waiting list because it's only $50. I'm just going to renew it even though I'm not active.
And a lot of people.
I do support it. I hate it because I don't like the government fees, but I do support the renew fee. I was curious if, like, the occupancy and the whatever you are saying, if that played into how much it went up to, and everybody else is doing it. But then also, was there kind of like a stark comparison of occupancy in the non, east of, let's say, what you do, Pine Drive versus west of Pine Drive?
I don't know that we mapped those. And like I said, we only got responses from less than half of the permits. And that was at the time, so.
The thing that could affect is if the areas in the green are renting out twice as much in the areas of the outside, it may be that we want to give the green 60% of the cap or 70% of,
And that was also one of the scenarios that kind of played out in my head. Do you want to allow for growth in the zone and not the rest of the city? it doesn't have to be equal just because it developed that way. Do you want to leave room for growth in this density zone, but let it stay where it is in the rest of the city?
All right, I got two more quick things.
Yes.
One, I see that light teal line that confused me at first, but I think it is actually the Porter Avenue district. Is that what that is? It's like
That's
a teal
correct.
line.
That's
Is that what
Porter
that is?
Avenue.
But it has almost no, there's no reason to even talk about
No,
it.
it has no residential. Everything in there is zone CMX1.
I think, yeah, like I said, I'm
Right.
staring at
Residential
it like,
use,
am I supposed
but
to
it's-
be? Okay, fine, all right,
Yeah.
I won't say that.
That's why we didn't even bring it up.
So kind of going back to what Joey was asking, kind of, I don't want to kick the can down. I don't want to delay another
Right.
month to have a workshop that we can't fit in this week. So we cannot discuss an email because it's not a public hearing.
Right.
But y'all can send us information and we can respond to y'all individually. We just can't reply all.
Right,
That's
yes.
correct?
You can send your individual recommendations.
I
Y'all
can,
could get us like the survey results. the
I can send you a little more details now. It was a little hard to put all that in writing and not have it be misunderstood at the conversation. Now that we've had the conversation, you kind of see where my head space has been on this, and sorry about that. Now it'll make more sense when I do kind of write down more of those details. So I'll give you a little more detailed information, and what we'll do is a blind copy, so you just reply, not reply all, with any input that you have. And I've reached out to the mayor to kind of see, get some guidance from him as far as interacting with the aldermen. I have talked to the aldermen that it would impact the most. We've reached out to them individually to get their input. So this has not been silent. We have been talking to them to get their input, and they kind of know the frequency that we're on.
Is the green entirely within 1 and 2? Or is 3?
It's mostly two and a little bit of 3.
Okay, one's on the other side.
One's on, yeah, one's north.
Yeah, okay, so there is
So
some
we did
3
talk to-
towards the east, but mostly 2.
Yep. We did talk to Kevin Wade because he's on the edge of it, if not slightly in it, and he's understanding and kind of on board with the concept. So once we knew that, because they're the ones that are most affected, and so we have talked to them. They understand the concept. They're on board with the concept. So now it's just applying those numbers. And really, the numbers, I don't want to get bogged down in numbers. Really, it is, do you want to meet the current request, current demand, and cap it there, because maybe we don't need to go any more than that. I mean, that's just under 50%, and if we round it up to at least 115 or 120, because I can't have a 114 cap, that's just too arbitrary. That equates into right at a 52% increase. If we lifted it to 120, which would be 60%, 60 in the zone and 60 outside the zone.
52%.
It grows.
Not counting the commercial.
Correct. I'm only talking residential, because we don't have a cap. We have no way of predicting commercial short-term rental. Any commercially zoned property could conceptually become a short-term rental or a boutique hotel. So we have no way of predicting that growth. And that's kind of one of the things we looked at when we looked at that overlay district of how many residential properties were in there. Would that be a substantial factor? And the answer is no.
So I'm going to just kind of recap. We're going to get an email from y'all that's blind. We're not going to talk to each other about it. We are going to make recommendations. We will have an ordinance next meeting. We really need to jump on those pretty quick for y'all, because Amanda said March.
Next Thursday, we'd have to advertise.
But you got to have the ordinance done.
I'm going to get you
Right.
something by Thursday or first thing on Friday. We would need you,
Like this.
I know you, yes. I know you have absolutely nothing else to do on, St. Patrick's Day weekend, so that'll be your homework.
It's all the amateurs are out there.
I know, right? But, we'll give you a date to have them back, the input back by, so that we can meet the advertising date, or at least the publishing date.
Do you have to have the ordinance complete
By the time it is in the paper, but if we send it to the paper on Thursday, it's in Sunday? Fridays.
So y'all really
No,
need
this
our
is,
comments
it's a few
Monday,
days.
Tuesday.
Sun Herald is the day before,
Okay.
because it runs every day now.
Okay, I thought, we'll have to talk about that, because I thought the schedule I have is different. Okay,
Either way, we need to get on it.
yeah,
Yep.
yes. So once you receive it, and like I said, I have a lot of this stuff, you don't even want to see all the notes that I've been trying to come up with a good scenario, but the best I can do is, really it's, do you want to aim underneath the waiting list and not say that should drive what the cap is? Or do you want to meet the request or allow for growth in one area or the other? That's really once you tune in on one of those concepts, we can refine the actual number.
But, I mean, you would take any comments on fees or things
Anything.
that haven't even been talked about.
Right, if there's something that we didn't think about, or, because we may have thought about it, but decided not to make any changes in it. So if there's any questions you have about the existing one, or thoughts that you may have, sometimes we're too close to it, and, to get your perspective on things that you may have been told or heard. So any input on short-term rentals, period. And it may be one of those that we say, well, let's look into that, but we're not going to make that change now,
And I would encourage my commissioners, you don't even have to wait till you get an email.
No, you don't. You don't.
can do it tonight.
I got a couple quick questions. One, at the next meeting, we're gonna have an ordinance,
That is the plan.
okay? But you can't send us a draft of that ahead of time to comment on.
Well, once we have it ready once we advertise it, then it has to be ready for people to request a copy. So the draft ordinance would be ready before you would normally get your packet, because that's the purpose of that. So,
There'd be no harm in sharing that, right? Y'all can send that to us, because, I mean, we can go to the paper and get it anyway, right?
right. I mean, but once the advertisement simply says that there is an ordinance being considered. It doesn't put the whole ordinance in the paper, because that would be a lot of money. But it says to call the office for a copy to review. So we have to have it ready by the time that publishing.
And maybe my final question, how many businesses currently have a vacation rental?
We had, commercial-wise,
No, not commercial, other than commercial. Are there any businesses that have the vacation rental in and non-business?
I don't
You
know.
said you were gonna open it up to businesses to have.
Oh, that was just to be the property manager. That was just to be the official property manager. Right now, the way it's set up is we anticipate getting an individual's name and their residence, where they live.
My
So,
comment for that is I don't care what the LLC or a person's name, but I do think it should be 24/7.
24/7 and within 2 miles of the city limits, and that was for responsiveness.
I think they need to have somebody assigned, and I think that if it is a business, I think they should still name.
Right.
the name.
But, it was like, how do you govern that, and if it changes?
How do you govern it now?
So, right. So the main thing is, right now, it reads specifically their home address, which implies an individual. So maybe just clarifying that home or brick and mortar business address has to be within that 2 miles. That way, there is some expectation that they will respond
Yeah, I
accordingly.
think you need to do that, because otherwise people are gonna have an objection. If you go outside the city.
Yeah, no, we still want to keep it in that bubble.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
anything associated with that property has to be inside the city.
So it really doesn't change the way the ordinance functions. It just clarifies that it could be a business. When we first started, it was all individuals doing it. Now there's a couple of people that have started companies. So they're still individuals, but it's a company. So it's kind of gotten muddy. So we just want to clarify that.
Okay.
All right. Any other discussion for today? Everybody like the marching orders and the approach?
Homework.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion Mike, second Matthew, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
And I'm only an hour, 15 minutes late for rehearsals.
The other
No,
day-
you've been having rehearsals.
Right.
Right.
It was the other drama.
You just talking about like in general with my